Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. This week I received an email from Guide One. Guide One is our insurance company, and they send Safety Watch e-newsletters. And this is the one that I received this week. In fact, it's dated February the 25th, 2015. Check and protect, screen your workers and volunteers. Here's the paper that I received this week from them. I'll read a couple paragraphs of it. It says, whether good or bad, it is not uncommon to hear a church's name in the nightly news. These can stem from volunteer and fundraising efforts to topics not so user-friendly. A sad example of this is sexual abuse. A male volunteer Sunday school teacher in his 30s inappropriately touched two girls who were 10 and 12 years old. Reference checks before the Sunday school teacher started indicated that he was not eligible for employment at two previous places, but the church used him anyway. He pled guilty to criminal charges, and a civil claim was brought against the church for negligent selection and supervision shortly thereafter. Tragic incidents such as this emphasize the vital importance of screening the employees and volunteers who work with children and special needs adults in your congregation. Again, I said I just got this week, and so I'm showing you that how important it is for us to fill out these volunteer service booklets. On the front of the booklet, it says volunteer service booklet. It'll have a number of areas, forms there. It shows the forms that are included in the booklet. And there's a volunteer service form, driving information, that's for those who drive the vehicles here, providing a safe environment, that's for everyone that works with children, personal reference, that's for new workers, prior service reference for new workers, Christian worker covenant for everyone, policies and procedures for everyone. There's a confidentiality agreement, that's for those that work with the finances of the church. There's a background investigation, consent, and that's for everyone. A policies for working with children, restroom procedures, and that's for those, again, who work with children. Now let's go through this booklet. I'm not going to read everything in the booklet, but I will share important parts, but you can follow along and mark these and read between the lines even. The volunteer service form is the first page, and again, we want to thank everyone for considering volunteer service here at Liberty Baptist Church. And we appreciate the gifts that God has given to you. And I believe that God has given gifts to everyone to be used in the local church. And this is a form for everyone to fill out. The second page is providing a safe environment. And this form is to be filled out by everyone who works with children, youth, senior citizens, or developmentally disabled. And that would be ushers, deacons, teachers, junior church workers, King's Kids workers, nursery workers, you work in the Patch the Pirate Club, bus workers, all those that work with children. You need to complete the form if you work with children. Then the next page is the volunteer statement. In consideration of the receipt and evaluation of this application by the church, I agree and represent that the information contained in this application is correct to the best of my knowledge. I authorize any references or any other person, whether or not identified in this application, to give you any information, including opinions, regarding my character and fitness for volunteer service. That gives us the right to ask for references. There's a personal reference form and a prior service reference form for new workers. Then we go to the Christian Worker Covenant. For all of those who work in the ministry here, we have this covenant. Therefore, we are asking all church workers to prayerfully read and sign the following covenant. I have been saved, baptized, and am a member of this church. We don't allow anyone to work in the church ministry that's not a member of the church. You say, well, that seems almost
simple to understand, but you wouldn't believe it. But we have people that want to work here that don't even belong to our church, and but that's not going to happen. Number 2, I will read my Bible and pray every day. Number 3, I will attend church services unless providentially hindered, and support it in every way possible. Workers, this is important, must attend at least one church service each week in addition to the ministry which they are involved. Sometimes we have people who get so involved in ministry they never come to a church service. You must attend one church service. If you can only attend one church service, it'd be better for you just to come to the church service than to serve. And so that's very important, and that's why I point that out. I'll tithe regularly. I will support our pastor as the God-called leader of this church. I will abstain from all appearance of evil. I'll bring glory to God in everything I do, in conversation, dress, and conduct. Church workers should not be associated with or conform to the world's standards and fads. All kinds of things going on, body piercing and earrings on men and dyeing your hair in strange colors and all of those things. We're examples to the people here, and so we need to be good examples. Those who work in the following ministries are expected to follow a certain dress code while performing their duties. I look at this as being our uniform. You go to different places and they wear uniforms. You go into the bank and they're dressed up in there. You go to your doctor and he's dressed up. You go to the hospital and they're dressed up. Yeah, you can go to McDonald's and they're wearing uniforms in there. I just look at this as being our uniform when we're working here in this church. I believe that we ought to do it in a professional way. That's why I know that people sometimes make fun of me because I wear a white shirt and I wear a tie every place I go. But I just think if I'm going to visit somebody in the hospital, I should have a tie and a jacket on, and I should be a good example of the office that God has called me to. And I go places I'm called all during the week to go different places, and I think that I need to be a good representation of Liberty Baptist Church. And so that's why I dress this way, and that's why I ask you to dress this way when we're working here in the ministry, because we're representing the Lord, we're representing this church. And so, nursery workers, teachers, helpers, ushers, children's workers, children's church workers, people, even if you work in the bookstore, deacons, bus workers, youth workers, visitation, choir members, men wear ties and jackets, long trousers, and ladies should wear modest dresses or skirts. When you're doing your job, that's what we're talking about. Youth workers should maintain the same standard as above, with the exception of their youth clubs. Of course, they have their own shirts and so forth they wear for that, and so they can wear those things. And it's appropriate for men going on visitation to wear a sport or casual shirts. We allow that when they're going canvassing and so forth. But I just look at it as being our uniform when we're out and we're serving for the Lord. Number 8, I will not criticize, complain, or gossip. If I have a problem, I'll take it to the Lord and the one in charge of the ministry. Number 9, I'll be on time, prepared, and organized to all meetings. All workers are required to attend ministry meetings. If unable to attend, contact the ministry leader. If 3 consecutive meetings are missed, workers will automatically drop from that ministry. You just need to be there for those things. I'll use the King James Version in my teaching at Liberty Baptist Church. We believe the King James Bible is the preserved Word of God, and that's why we use that here. Number 11, I promise to inform the pastor if I am unable to fulfill my covenant obligations. Next page is the policies and procedures for church workers. The problem is real that we're dealing with here. Hundreds of churches have been sued as a result of sexual molestation of minors by church workers. It's happening regularly. If you get the Christian Law Association's paper, then you read that. Many of you get that. You'll see all of the churches that are being sued. Every month that we get that, we see churches are being sued for these things. Many think no child has been molested in our church, so why worry? And this attitude is an attitude of denial. It's very dangerous. And the insurance executives have said this is an epidemic here in our churches. Some churches, rather than fill these forms out, they just don't carry insurance. And but we have chosen to carry insurance. And so that's why we do this. Our insurance company makes us do it as a result of that. The lack of a prevention program leaves the children, church, and church leaders vulnerable. It can happen in our church. Incidents of molestation can occur in any church. Churches are by nature trusting and unsuspecting. The impact, a single incident of a child molestation can devastate a church and divide the congregation. All there has to be is an accusation. It doesn't even have to be true. And so we have to be above reproach in these areas. The good news is these steps can significantly reduce the likelihood of child sexual abuse in our church. Another important objective will be accomplished, reducing the legal and liability exposure for our church. Church policies that govern working with the children or youth. New volunteers are prohibited from involvement with children's activities, youth ministry, nursery camps, or daycare until they have actively attended the church for 1 month. Nobody works alone in the nursery or any other children's ministry in the church. All adult workers must be cleared in advance with the pastoral staff before they're allowed to work in any children's ministry. You just can't invite someone to come and work in the ministry. And we've had this happen. People invite someone to come and to be in the ministry with them. You can't do that. They've not been cleared. We don't know who they are, and so you just can't invite anyone to come in there. There should always be a sufficient number of adults so that not only are the children watched, but the adults can be accountable to one another as well. That's why we have a 2-adult rule. Adequate adult supervision must be maintained before and after the event. So you don't just have the event and then you just leave. You've got to maintain order before and afterwards. Until the children are in custody of their parents or legal guardians. When there is a teenage worker, there must be an adult worker working in conjunction with them, the teen. At this time in our society, teen boys cannot be allowed to be nursery workers. When a parent has to be called out of a service to attend to a child, an usher, not a nursery worker, should do it. This helps prevent one worker being left alone while the other goes to get the parent. Only assigned workers or their approved substitutes are allowed in the nursery. The only exceptions are for nursing mothers and a parent called in to calm the upset child. Workers should receive the child at the door of the nursery and deliver the child to the door for pickup. F. Change diapers in full view of another adult. Allow only parents to retrieve a child from the nursery. H. Do not permit any child to leave the room with anyone at any time other than the parent. I. Never spank, hit, shake, yell, or scream at a child. Take a problem child to the department head. They'll contact the parent. Never allow a school-aged child or children to sit on your lap, and always keep your hands visible at all times. Never tickle a child. Be obvious as well as discreet about any hugs given to children. And I have an addendum, and you saw that sheet that was added there. It's an addendum to this. It's over some things that we went over last year in a church meeting. In addition to this, many adults are uncomfortable with being hugged and are shy to say anything. Good etiquette teaches that hugging can cause real discomfort for some. Also, it could be misinterpreted as sexual harassment. We must practice good etiquette. Men should only hug a lady that initiates it first. Again, be careful with your behavior with the opposite sex. Whether hugging, touching, texting, you must be above reproach in these areas. Number N, children should never be unattended. Children should not be allowed to abuse other children. Never go out on visitation alone. Always go in pairs. Church staff or volunteer workers must obtain the consent of a child's parent or guardian before going out alone with that child or spending time with the child in an unsupervised situation. Workers must notify and clear the activity with the pastor in advance. You just don't have an activity unless that activity has been cleared if it's a church activity. Children must always have a signed parental permission slip with an emergency medical treatment release for involvement in church-sponsored programs or activities. When we talk about children, we're talking about those who are 12 and under. Keep a detailed record of attendances and adults by name who were present in any class or at any activity. Any inappropriate conduct or relationships between an adult volunteer worker and a member of the youth group or children's ministry must be confronted immediately and investigated. If you see something that's inappropriate, then you must report that. You go to the church office, and we have forms where you can report that. And don't delay. That needs to be done. Notify the pastor or ministry leader immediately. The adult worker services will be terminated immediately for continued violation of warnings. The church also holds the right to terminate the worker's service immediately. Adults who work with children and adolescent youth need to understand the following. Sexual relationships with minors can lead to a felony conviction and imprisonment in a state penitentiary. The church insurance policy may not provide them with a legal defense of sexual misconduct charge, or pay any portion of the jury verdict assessed against them on account of such conduct. The definition of child abuse. The precise legal definition of child sexual abuse or molestation varies from state to state, but in general includes any form of sexual contact or exploitation in which a minor is being used for the sexual stimulation of the perpetrator. It's any sexual activity with a child. Child sexual abuse may be violent or non-violent. Child sexual abuse is criminal behavior that involves children in sexual behaviors for which they are not personally, socially, or developmentally ready. Child sexual abuse includes behaviors that involve touching and non-touching aspects. There are different types. The types of abuse that involve touching include 1 through 4 there in your notes. And then the types of sexual abuse that do not involve touching include 1 through 5. Sexual and physical abuse symptoms. Church workers and staff should be alert to the physical signs of abuse and molestation, as well as to behavioral and verbal signs that the victim may exhibit. And we have some of those things. There are physical signs, there are behavioral signs, there are verbal signs. And if you see these things, then you can, of course, go to the office and report them. The civil and criminal consequences of misconduct. Child sexual abuse is a crime for which the offender is tried in a criminal court. The damage against a victim can also be cause for a suit in civil court. In regards to the civil suit, the church may also face legal proceedings. When they go after a person, they go after everybody. More and more churches are being sued for alleged negligence in 3 specific areas: inappropriate hiring of staff, inappropriate supervision of children, failure to act on previous knowledge of wrongdoing. Reporting procedures for observed or suspected misconduct. Discreet and confidential reporting of suspected abuse is critical to abuse prevention. Report immediately to the church office and fill out a report form. A line of investigation will be followed in every case of suspected abuse. Screening all workers in the church ministry. One of the biggest concerns that we have is screening our workers that work with children and having policies that protect both children and workers. Understand that we're not just protecting the children, we're trying to protect you, which is important, and the church. We need to practice common sense in this area to guard against false accusations as well as the possibility of wrongdoing. See, sometimes if we don't do these things, people can make false accusations. And that can be just as hurtful. You have to go through some of the same procedures. And so we are trying to protect ourselves from those things. Why screen workers in the church environment? Our ministry requires many workers. We want a safe and secure environment. The courts have clearly established the negligence of churches who do not do these things and do the background checks on all workers. What does the screening include? All volunteers will be subject to filling out an application including questions about whether the individual has ever been convicted for any crime, including sex-related or child abuse-related offenses. A personal but confidential questionnaire for you to fill out. Criminal background investigation, verification of references, personal interviews, staff orientation, policies and procedures for church workers and Christian Work Covenant. Assign permission for us to conduct a background check on you with the police. A follow-up visit from the church staff. What information in your background would be of concern to our church? A record which indicates that you have a past or present problem with physical or sexual abuse against minors. A record which indicated you have been guilty of sexual or abusive crimes. We're not necessarily looking for types of crimes, especially those that were committed as a young person before you were saved. And we fully realize that salvation changes lives, and that we will always take that into consideration. Here's a comment, I probably should include this. Parents who have lost children due to drugs need to be clean for 3 years and have children back in their home. If you do not want to submit to this investigation, you will not be permitted to work in any ministry dealing with minor children. However, other ministries in the church are available to you. We once had a lady in our church. She was being investigated for child abuse, and her children had actually been taken out of her home. She was working in one of our ministries, and I had to go and ask her to please step down until all of these things were investigated and they were finished. And she got violently upset with me and said, well, I'll never come back to the church. And she didn't. But her children had been taken out of the home, and there's no way that we could have that lady working with our children in the church. And to be honest with you, I do not know what happened in that situation, because she did leave the church as a result of that. She did not want us. And of course she did, and we lost contact with her, and so I don't know all of the situation. But again, we could not have that. We could not have her working with children, even when her children were taken out of the home. Policies for working with children. You are not to act as the child's friend in a children's friendship manner. We're not saying that you're not to be friendly. You're not to be like a child friend to them. You are his or her teacher. You must always appropriately maintain your proper respect and authority status and act accordingly. This does not mean that you cannot act friendly, but it does mean that you at all times act with the respect and dignity which is befitting your position of the ministry. Men in the church should endeavor never to touch any child. If found necessary to touch a child, it should always be remembered that the touching will be viewed by the authorities in a very suspicious and or critical manner. Ladies in the church should endeavor to only touch children when necessary, and then only from the shoulders up. As much as possible, no person should ever be alone with a child. If at all possible, always have at least 2 adults present. Children should not be permitted to sit on any worker's lap. As a general policy, children should not be hugged or kissed by church workers. Children, and of course, this hugging part, we've talked about this and we've had videos about this, and we know that there are times that they can receive a hug, but we know how to do that. We teach how to do that above the shoulders. There are ways that it can be done. And so we're not trying to be cold or anything, but we're just trying to show you there are ways that things should be done and should not be done. Children should never stay overnight at a church worker's home. Church nursery workers who deal with diapers should adhere to the following procedures. Always endeavor to wear rubber gloves. Never apply lotion or powder with your bare hand. A cloth or wipe should always be between you and the child. Under oath, you must be able to testify that you did not inappropriately touch the child directly. All nursery workers must be ladies. If possible, avoid assisting a non-nursery older aged child who has wet or soiled his or her clothes. Endeavor to instruct him or her on how to clean himself or herself without your direct assistance. And I know it may be frustrating. You may hand him or her what he or she needs, but do not directly clean or wash the non-nursery older aged child. Number 10, avoid helping a young boy with his zipper or a young girl with her skirt. Have a large t-shirt available for them to wear to cover such problems. Do not touch the children. Do everything you can to keep the parents informed about and involved in their child's activities at the church. Remember, the children are the responsibility of the parents. You cannot assume the responsibility of the parents, even if the parents are not treating their children as well as you feel they should. Sunday school teachers, I will attend all teachers' meetings. I will attend all leadership meetings. I will be actively involved in the outreach ministries of our church. I will contact all absentees weekly. I will regularly contact and encourage the faithful members of my Sunday school class. I will attend all regular church services, special services, revival services, and special programs of our church unless providentially hindered. I will only teach approved material in my Sunday school class. I'll be on time for Sunday school and all church services. I will not teach anything contrary to our church covenant. I'll use only the King James Version to teach my students. I will set the example in conduct as a leader in our church. Men, I will wear a coat and tie while teaching my class to help aid in an atmosphere of authority. Ladies, I'll wear a modest dress or skirt and blouse while teaching to help aid an atmosphere of authority. I'll be loyal to our pastor and the church. I will promise to resign my Sunday school class if I'm unable to meet my obligations as a Sunday school teacher. I will do this first, seeking out the pastor. In addition, I promise I will endeavor not to disrupt the church fellowship. Next form is the background investigation consent for you to sign. Policies for working with children concerning the restroom procedures. These things I know are difficult, but this is what we have to do. On Sunday mornings before Sunday school begins, children riding the bus, church bus, will be taken to the restroom before going to the classroom. Bus workers will follow the guidelines listed below. Children who are brought by a parent or other adult directly to class will be encouraged to be taken to the restroom and brought back to the class by the parent. Number 2, when a child or children need to be taken to the restroom, 2 adults need to escort the children to the outside of the bathroom. In a classroom situation where there is a teacher and a helper, get the helper in the next classroom to go with your helper. Leave both classroom doors open while the teachers are in the classroom alone with the children. One adult then needs to check to make sure there is no one in the restroom. If there is, wait until the restroom is empty. The children need to be sent in one at a time alone. No adult, even the worker, should be in the restroom with a child. Only one child at a time. In the case of a restroom with more than one stall, one of the workers should prop the door open with their body to observe as children are sent into the stalls one at a time. Never allow anyone to enter a stall with a child. This includes another child. Have the rest of the children lined up in the hallway. If someone approaches the restroom while you're allowing the children in there, you must stop them from entering and explain that they must wait until the children are completely done and out, or direct them to another restroom. You need to be bold about this. If a child is taking longer than seems necessary, the worker should call the child's name to see if they need assistance. If they do need assistance, the worker needs to leave the stall door open while assisting the child. Both workers then need to escort the children back to the classroom. Then on the back of your booklet, there's a place back there for you to sign your name, and you can date it. And if you need to talk with me, then there's a place for you to check about that. And you sign it that you're in agreement. In other words, many of you have already signed this, but we sign it again back here. And then we can date it. And then you can date it and say, yes, I've watched the video. We're going to watch a video right now. Are we ready for that? Then we'll watch the video right now.
Welcome to Safe Church's Act to Keep Children Safe training. Hi, I'm Christine Yount-Jones, Executive Editor of Children's Ministry Magazine. We at Group Publishing, in partnership with Guide One Insurance, have created this program for children's ministry volunteers. This information will help you and your church reduce the risk of sexual abuse. Sadly, almost 90,000 children in the U.S. are the victims of sexual abuse each year. That's why it's so important for you to get risk-reducing training like this. So thanks for taking time to learn about keeping the kids at your church safe. It's vital that you serve in a ministry that protects children. To help us with this difficult subject, we've invited Dave Thornton. Dave serves as the director of Safe Church and has been a leader in children's ministry for decades. Thanks for lending your expertise to this important project, Dave.
You're welcome, Chris. I'm glad to share helpful safety ideas for children's ministry volunteers. My heart breaks every time I hear a story of a child that's been abused as a result of a relationship that developed at church. Let's talk about how you as a children's ministry volunteer can take action to protect children from child abuse.
When I was growing up in church, we never heard about sexual abuse. Are we overreacting to an uncommon problem?
No, the problem is real, Chris, and it happens more often than we'd like to think. Sexual abuse happens at about the same rate in all types of churches, large or small. Guide One Insurance estimates that 1 in 100 churches will face a sexual abuse incident each year. Most cases involving adults molesting children, but children and youth can abuse too. We must do our best as churches to prevent both risks.
That's right. The Bible is clear about our duty to protect children. In Matthew 19, Jesus says to let the little children come to me and do not hinder them. Putting children into a risky situation is hindering them in a terrible way.
That's so true. Children who've been abused in a church setting often have a hard time maintaining their faith. Can you imagine how difficult it would be for a child to trust God and believe in His goodness after being molested by a person in authority at church? Child sexual abuse can steal a childhood and can cause a lifetime of spiritual crises.
The most important reason to protect children is to honor the Lord by taking care of the kids He loves so much. Loving children means going to great lengths to protect them. Besides being harmful to the immediate victim, I've heard about court cases where abuse is destructive to entire churches too.
That's true, Chris, and the destruction isn't limited to financial damage. Emotional trauma to families and leaders, congregational disputes, shattered trust in leaders in the church, embarrassing media coverage, complicated court cases. It's a tragedy for the victimized child that can rip apart a church.
Sexual abuse is so evil. It's just not what churches are about. The whole subject is so depressing that most of us would rather not think about it.
That's right. But churches tend to avoid difficult subjects like sexual abuse and instead focus all our energy on ministry to children. There are proven practices that reduce the risk of abuse, practices that make ministry to children better as well as safer. Safety requires all of us to be informed about the problem and courageous enough to take action when needed.
Courageous how?
We can't let our fear of confronting a difficult subject like child abuse keep us from protecting children. Courageous ministry leaders make the extra effort to keep kids safe.
We want to equip you to be courageous. And we'll describe the problem, and then we'll provide safe ministry principles you can practice at your church.
We're going to review 3 essential strategies summed up with the acronym ACT. ACT stands for awareness, communication, and taking action. Volunteers should act to keep kids safe from sexual abuse. First, let's talk about awareness. We need to understand what sexual abuse is. Legal definitions vary from state to state, but in general, child sexual abuse involves any activity in which a minor is used for the sexual stimulation of a perpetrator. The perpetrator may be an adult, a teenager, or another child. Child sexual abuse is criminal behavior. It can involve both touching and non-touching behaviors. Fondling, intercourse, rape, and child pornography are obvious forms of sexual abuse. Other less obvious examples include having inappropriate conversations, showing a child pornography, obscene phone calls, indecent exposure or flashing, and allowing children to view sexual activity.
Ministry leaders must be alert to the symptoms of child sexual abuse. These warning symptoms may be physical, behavioral, or expressed by the words of children. Physical symptoms may be bruises or scrapes, irritation or injury to the genital area, discomfort when sitting, and torn or bloody underclothing. Behavioral symptoms may include anxiety about church or certain activities or individuals, nervous or hostile behavior to adults or older children or youth, or acting out sexual behavior. It can also include knowing more about sexual topics than is appropriate for the age of the child. Listen carefully for troubling comments from kids, such as,
I don't like her. He does things to me when we're alone. I don't want to be alone with her. He's fooling around with me. He's scary.
There are other important awareness issues outlined in the article about child safety included in this online training program. Please take a close look at that article after watching this video.
You know, Dave, all of this is so hard to hear.
I know, Chris, it's hard to talk about, but remember what we were saying about having courage?
Okay, let's continue. You said C is for communication.
Yes. Church volunteers should always report questionable behavior by another volunteer or child to their ministry leader. If something doesn't seem right, talk it over with your leader. Every state has what are called mandatory reporting laws. These are rules requiring people in certain occupations to report evidence of child abuse to law enforcement or social services. Check with your leader to understand how mandatory reporting works in your church and your state. A volunteer should always be sensitive to any potential safety problems and communicate issues to their leader. Only after a safety problem is identified can volunteers and staff communicate to resolve it.
You'd want to report anything that looked unsafe, or let your ministry leader know if you had any concerns about actual abuse. We've talked about awareness and communication. Now let's talk about taking action.
That's right, Chris. The T in ACT is taking action. So let's focus now on smart actions that will help safeguard children. Ministry workers can use several proven practices that work to reduce the chances of abuse. Whenever possible, church workers should work in teams of 2 or more. The 2-adult procedure ensures that a worker is never isolated with a child, and it puts both workers above suspicion if a question comes up.
Plus, I've found that 2 volunteers working together enjoy the experience so much more. It's less stressful, and it's easier to give kids more attention when you don't feel all alone. So Dave, do you recommend allowing teens to help?
Sure. Teens are great volunteers when they're supervised.
What about situations where one volunteer has to leave early, or when one child needs to leave the room to go to the restroom? How do we follow the 2-adult procedure then?
I don't know of perfect solutions for those times. Some churches assign an extra volunteer during each service who's available just for these purposes. Other churches recruit specifically for potty patrol and have a flag you can raise outside your door when you need help. The idea that one volunteer may have to be alone with children temporarily reminds me of the next proven procedure, open door ministry. Just like it sounds, this rule means that whenever possible, isolation is avoided. Open doors, perhaps with baby gates if needed, windows between rooms, plenty of visibility. Sensitive activities, like diaper changing, for example, should be done in view of other adults.
Since you mentioned diapering, what about children who are old enough to use the potty by themselves? What are the best ways to handle restroom procedures for them?
Again, there's no one perfect way to handle this issue, but here are a few ideas. Children 5 years old and younger should use a classroom bathroom if available. If a classroom bathroom is not available, an adult should escort a group of children to a hallway bathroom. When the group arrives at the bathroom, check to make sure the room is empty to ensure no other adults or teens are already in the restroom. Then allow the children to go inside. The worker should remain outside of the bathroom and escort all the children back to the classroom when everyone is finished. If a child is taking longer than seems necessary, the worker should open the bathroom door and call the child's name. If the child requires assistance, the worker should prop open the bathroom door and leave the stall door open as he or she assists the child. A worker should never take a child to the bathroom alone. For children above the age of 5, at least one, and preferably 2, adult males should take the boys to the restroom, and at least one female, or preferably 2, should take the girls. The volunteers should check the bathroom first to make sure that it is empty, then allow the children inside. The volunteer should then remain outside the bathroom door and escort the children back to the classroom. To protect everyone, a volunteer should never be alone with a child in a bathroom with the door closed, and never in a closed bathroom stall with a child. Parents should be encouraged to have their children visit the bathroom prior to each class. The volunteer should stand outside the restroom to make sure that no other children or adults enter the bathroom. Avoid letting unsupervised children leave a classroom to go down the hall to use a bathroom.
How can churches safely check young children into and out of classes? Do you have any recommendations?
Church check-in and check-out procedures are a great safety measure for small children. If your church doesn't have clearly defined procedures for check-in, ask your leader to get a simple system started. It's vital that young children are released only to parents or guardians who bring them in the first place, or other adults only with written permission. There are lots of ways your church can do this, from something as simple as a sign-in and sign-out sheet to more sophisticated systems such as pagers or pre-printed identification cards. Whatever system you use, you want to make sure that only authorized adults can remove a child and that no unauthorized person can simply walk away with a child under your care.
So, we've addressed safety in church situations. What about driving children to and from activities? In my experience, transportation causes a lot of headaches.
Volunteers should drive kids only when it's planned in advance. Parents should be notified and have signed permission forms. You can find sample permission forms on the Safe Church website. Ideally, it's best to follow the 2-adult procedure here too, using a driver and an assistant. If that's not possible, make sure that the driver is never alone with one child. Have the driver bring along her own children, or require that they pick up or drop off the children in a group. Vehicles provide isolation, and as we've said, isolation can enable a child molester. Familiarize yourself with your church's transportation policies. You can find a sample church transportation policy on the Safe Church website.
So Dave, we've talked about several proven ideas so far, using 2 adults, nursery and diaper procedures, restrooms, and transportation policies. What else should volunteers know about?
Some activities hold more risk than others. For example, off-site activities and overnight events can pose more risk. Here are a few principles to follow.
First, consider adding extra adults. A simple way I've found to add extra adults is to make it a family ministry event that includes parents and children in the activity.
Another principle is to try to change the location. Any place that provides opportunities for isolation of one adult and a child is risky. Some riskier locations include a church member's home or outdoors. I'm not saying churches should never plan programs that are away from church grounds, but when you do, build in extra adult supervision. Here are a few principles to consider for overnight events. Extra supervision is required, So invite parents and other safe adults to help chaperone. If both boys and girls will be attending, you'll need both male and female chaperones and separate sleeping quarters for each gender. Boys and girls should have separate shower and restroom facilities. Beds should not be shared between any adult and a minor except among family members. And caution needs to be taken about allowing minors, even of the same gender, to share beds. Finally, be careful about mixing age groups for overnights because older children can be a risk to younger ones.
I've heard that audio-visual rooms in churches are problem areas too. Why is that?
These rooms can be hazardous because they provide darkness and seclusion, and they're hard to observe. Establish a minimum age for children to volunteer in the sound room and follow the 2-adult rule there.
So any situation that provides extra challenges for supervision or opportunities for children to be isolated poses a bigger risk. Dave, you've said any activity that mixes children of different ages has the potential for older children or youth to take advantage of little ones. That's really hard for me to think about.
I know it is. But Guide 1 Insurance has seen that in 1 of 5 cases of church sexual abuse, the offender is another minor. For example, a 12-year-old boy undressed a 6-year-old girl inside a log playhouse on the church playground and touched her inappropriately. This doesn't mean we can't mix age groups, just that we need to think ahead and supervise children carefully.
This almost makes me feel like nothing is safe, and I can see how it might make people afraid to even hug kids.
I don't think we need to be afraid to hug or comfort kids. Here are a few common sense principles. Any touching, such as hugging, should be age appropriate and based upon the need of the child, not the worker. For example, an adult volunteer holding a 2-year-old who has skinned her knee to provide comfort would be appropriate. But the same volunteer hugging a 12-year-old member of the opposite sex may not. Touching should never take place in isolated settings, such as closed offices, classrooms, or one-on-one situations. Touching should never take place on personal parts of the body, such as private areas, except when following the church's diapering procedures. Consider the bathing suit guideline. Don't ever touch a part of a child's body that would be covered by a bathing suit. Workers should always avoid even the appearance of impropriety. By establishing appropriate boundaries and avoiding situations that could be misinterpreted by onlookers, church workers can help to avoid allegations of abuse or inappropriate conduct. Let the child initiate the physical contact, not the adult. Here are some practical ways to give safe hugs at church. Adults can lean over to give an A hug. That means just the shoulders and the necks of the huggers make contact. Another good hug is standing side by side and reaching around to squeeze a shoulder. Or you could substitute a high five or a handshake for a hug.
So, if you're working in the nursery and a toddler is upset and tugging at your pants leg,
don't hesitate for a second. Of course you can pick him up or rock him in your lap in a rocking chair. You're doing this in full view, out in the open, and another volunteer is in the room with you. The child is initiating the contact. Children need comforting touches. It's fine.
okay, what about touching a child for discipline purposes?
As a volunteer, I would never spank a child or use physical punishment, even if a parent has told you it's okay. Ask a ministry leader to help if a child is so out of control that you can't handle her with timeouts. Or you can ask the child's parent to step in and help. Check with your church to see if they have a touching and a discipline policy. The Safe Church website has a sample children's ministry handbook that covers these topics if your church doesn't have one. So in review, Chris, we covered awareness, communication, and taking action.
And the courage to tackle an ugly problem.
We can all have courage when we remember we're called to love and care for children just as Jesus does.
Thanks for investing your time in this training to protect the children in your ministry. God bless you as you serve.
if you've finished your volunteer form and you've signed all of the appropriate places,
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started.